They had marched for 3 years, across deserts and death, carrying the cross. But what they did before the walls of Jerusalem would stain that holy symbol forever. The sun bled across the horizon, spilling gold over the stone walls of Jerusalem. From the Mount of Olives, the Crusaders finally saw it, the city promised to them by God himself. Exhausted, starved, half-crazed from years of war, they fell to their knees and wept. Some kissed the dry earth. Others simply stared in silence. Raymond of Toulouse whispered, "There it is, the end of the world." But Jerusalem was not empty. Inside its thick walls waited the Fatimid garrison. Egyptian soldiers hardened by desert warfare, commanded by Iftikhar al-Dawla. The gates were locked, the wells sealed, and every road to the city was watched. Bohemond of Taranto spat into the dust. "We've come to die here," he muttered. The Crusaders had no siege engines, no supplies, and no clear plan. The city walls rose like cliffs of white fire under the sun. Too high, too strong, too sacred. Hunger gnawed at them, water was scarce. Horses collapsed where they stood, their bones picked clean by desperate men. Still, faith kept them standing. The priests paraded relics, singing Te Deum Laudamus under the burning sky. When the wind shifted, it carried the scent of death from the city's gates, a reminder that salvation lay beyond stone and steel. That night, as the Crusaders camped among olive trees, torches flickered across the ramparts. Arrows gleamed like falling stars. Someone whispered, "If this is God's city, why does he guard it against us?" No one answered. The siege of Jerusalem had begun, and before it ended, the holy city would drown in fire, blood, and prayer. The heat became their enemy long before the walls did. By late June, the Crusaders' camps shimmered in waves of dust and flies. Their wells ran dry, leather flasks were licked clean. Men collapsed by the dozens each day, lips cracked, eyes glassy. Horses, once proud war beasts, lay bloated and stinking in the sun. Godfrey of Bouillon moved through the camp like a ghost of iron, his armor caked with sweat and dust. "Hold the line of faith," he urged, though his voice was hoarse. "Jerusalem is within sight." "Sight doesn't quench thirst," muttered Tancred, wiping grime from his blade. His men had begun drinking from stagnant puddles and chewing grass for moisture. Inside the city, Iftikhar al-Dawla watched from the Tower of David. He knew the enemy was dying faster than they could fight. His archers mocked the Crusaders, waving buckets of water from the ramparts. "Drink from your faith," they shouted in Arabic, their laughter echoing down the walls. Desperation turned the Crusader camp into chaos. Some knights slipped away at night, seeking water in the hills. Others turned to the priests. Processions wound through the camp. Men barefoot, chanting prayers, carrying relics and crucifixes high. One monk cried out, "The Lord tests his soldiers. Endure, and he shall rain salvation." But no rain came, only the shriek of vultures circling overhead. Then, from the barren plains near the coast, salvation did appear, not divine but Venetian. A fleet of Genoese sailors had landed at Jaffa, bringing lumber, tools, ropes, the bones of siege towers. When the news reached the Crusader camp, men fell to their knees again, weeping. At last, the siege could truly begin. They would build machines to tear down the gates of God's city. Raymond of Toulouse looked up at the walls and whispered, "If this is the Lord's will, then may he forgive what we are about to do." By early July, the barren slopes around Jerusalem throbbed with the sounds of hammers and saws. From the Genoese ships came timber, sacred as manna to the dying Crusaders. The men worked day and night, sawing, shaping, binding planks together. They built siege towers tall as cathedrals, engines of war forged in the name of God. Godfrey of Bouillon oversaw the work, his face blackened by smoke and dust. "Every board we lift brings us closer to heaven," he told his men. But not everyone believed. "You think heaven waits behind those walls?" Tancred asked bitterly. "I see only death." Still, they labored. Even priests joined in, chanting hymns as they carried timber. Women brought buckets of water, what little remained, to cool the workers. Children gathered nails from broken armor. It was as if the entire host had become a single, trembling machine of faith. Inside Jerusalem, Iftikhar al-Dawla watched the towers rise. He ordered his men to strengthen the gates, to pour boiling oil and molten lead from the ramparts. Every night, his archers fired burning arrows into the Crusader camp. The air filled with sparks and the screams of men aflame. One night, a wind from the desert carried the smell of cedar and smoke into the city. "They are building monsters," a soldier murmured beside Iftikhar. "Wooden mountains that walk." Iftikhar replied quietly, "Then we shall turn their mountains into ash." But the Crusaders had something the defenders did not, a vision. On July 8th, after days of labor, the army was called to repentance. Barefoot, the knights and peasants marched around the city walls, singing psalms, tears streaking through their dust-covered faces. They carried crosses and relics, begging forgiveness for their sins. The defenders jeered until, days later, a miracle came. A cool wind swept the camp. The wells filled again. The men took it as a sign. "The Lord has answered," cried a priest. "Now strike." And so they did. The engines of faith were ready to move, and Jerusalem trembled before them. At dawn on July 13th, the horns of the Crusaders roared through the hills. From every camp rose a thunder of prayer and steel. The siege towers, wrapped in wet hides to resist fire, groaned as they began to move. Huge wooden beasts, dragged by hundreds of men, advanced toward the shining white walls of Jerusalem. Godfrey's tower led the assault on the northern wall. Raymond of Toulouse commanded another to the south. Between them, the air filled with the hiss of arrows and the crash of stones from mangonels. Every breath was fire and dust. Tancred, his face streaked with grime, shouted to his men, "Push! Push in the name of Christ!" The wheels sank into the scorched earth. Men strained, cursed, and sang psalms through broken teeth. Above, Muslim archers rained down death, bolts, stones, flaming oil. The towers burned and smoked, but still they rolled forward. From atop the walls, Iftikhar al-Dawla watched the strange miracle of men turning faith into machines. "Aim for their axles," he commanded. Arrows clattered off the hides. Fire spread along the wooden beams. The Crusaders answered with volleys of their own. Great bolts that smashed through battlements, sending defenders tumbling to the streets below. By noon, the sky was black with smoke. The sound of prayer mixed with the cries of the dying. A knight fell beside Godfrey, a spear through his chest, still whispering Dominus Vult. "God wills it." Then suddenly a terrible crash. The southern tower burst into flames, engulfed by Greek fire hurled from the walls. Raymond's men screamed as molten pitch poured down. The tower toppled, and for a moment the Crusaders faltered. But in the north, Godfrey's tower still rolled forward, its iron-shod beak scraping against the stone. The defenders tried to set it ablaze, but the hides held. "Closer!" Godfrey roared. "Closer to the gate of St. Stephen." And as night fell, the tower touched the wall. The moment of divine reckoning was at hand. Night bled into dawn. The northern wall of Jerusalem shuddered under the relentless strike of Godfrey's tower. Arrows hissed through the air, thudding into shields, flesh, and wood. The Crusaders below howled psalms like battle cries, Deus lo vult, the sound echoing off the sacred stones as if the earth itself prayed for vengeance. From the tower's top, Godfrey stood tall, his face lit by the fire below. "Raise the bridge," he shouted. With a grinding moan, the drawbridge fell against the battlements, forming a narrow path of wood between heaven and hell. Tancred was first to cross. Sword in hand, he leapt into a storm of arrows. His foot slipped on blood-slick stone, but he swung wildly, cutting down the first defender before him. Behind him surged a torrent of knights, Godfrey's men, grim and unstoppable. Inside the walls, chaos reigned. Iftikhar al-Dawla rode from tower to tower, shouting orders, his armor streaked with soot. "Hold the line, do not yield the wall." But his words were drowned by the roar of battle. Crusaders poured in from the breach like water through a broken dam. Below, the gates of St. Stephen began to splinter. The Crusaders rammed it again and again with logs and axes until, with a sound like thunder, it burst open. A flood of men, screaming, bleeding, and delirious with triumph, surged into Jerusalem. The defenders fell back to the inner streets. Women and children fled toward the Dome of the Rock, the last refuge. From every corner rose the scent of oil, blood, and burning wood. Raymond of Toulouse, arriving from the ruined southern tower, stared at the breach in disbelief. "God's will," he whispered, though his face was pale. Then the bells of Jerusalem began to toll, slow, mournful, echoing across the city that was no longer theirs. The Crusaders had broken through. The holy city was open, and what followed would become a wound in history that never healed. Morning broke over Jerusalem, but the sun rose on hell. Once the Crusaders entered the city, discipline dissolved. What began as holy victory turned instantly to madness. Knights who had sworn oaths before God now slaughtered without thought. The narrow streets echoed with screams. Blood ran in rivulets along the stones, thick as rainwater. Tancred stormed the Jewish quarter first. "No mercy," he bellowed, but within an hour, his sword arm trembled from exhaustion, slick with gore. Men tore through houses, dragging families from their doorways. Some cried out the names of saints, others the names of their mothers. Few survived long enough to be heard. Godfrey of Bouillon moved through the chaos like a man sleepwalking. He saw children trampled beneath horses, priests hacking down the unarmed, fires devouring entire alleys. "This is not what he willed," he murmured, but no one listened. At the Temple Mount, thousands had sought refuge. Muslims, Jews, even Christians who refused to fight, all crowded within the courtyard of Al-Aqsa. When the Crusaders reached it, they hesitated, just for a breath, before someone shouted, "Cleanse it for the Lord!" What followed defied belief. The knights waded through bodies as they fought from one end of the temple to the other. Chroniclers would later write that blood reached the knees of the horses, and though it may have been exaggeration, none who stood there doubted it felt true. Raymond of Toulouse arrived late and beheld the scene in horror. "Stop!" he cried. "Stop, for God sees you." But even his voice was lost in the inferno of steel and screams. By nightfall, the city of God burned like a funeral pyre. The smell of death was so heavy that men gagged as they prayed. Yet in their hearts, many believed they had fulfilled divine will. Godfrey knelt amid the corpses and whispered, "If this is victory, may heaven forgive us all." The next morning, a strange silence lay over Jerusalem. Not peace, but exhaustion. The fires still smoldered, and the streets were slick with ash and blood. The Crusaders moved like ghosts through the ruins, faces blank, armor blackened. For 3 days they had killed without rest. Now only the dead kept watch. Godfrey of Bouillon climbed the steps to the Temple Mount. Behind him, the dawn lit the Dome of the Rock, its golden face smeared with soot. He removed his helmet. "Here," he said softly, "where Solomon built his temple, we shall kneel." Tancred joined him, his eyes hollow. "Kneel? After this?" He gestured to the courtyard, where the bodies of hundreds lay piled like wood. "If the Lord is watching, he has turned his face away. Then we must make him look back," Godfrey replied. He entered the dome. Inside, the marble floor was streaked with red. Crusaders had slaughtered the defenders even here, around the sacred rock itself, the stone from which Muhammad was said to have ascended, and where Abraham once lifted his knife to Isaac. A priest followed, trembling, holding a cross high. "Purify it," he whispered. "This place belongs to Christ now." They began to cleanse the temple, scrubbing the floors, lighting candles, hanging banners of the cross. Yet no washing could erase the dark stains that clung to the stone. Outside, Raymond of Toulouse arrived, his cloak torn. He stared at the holy site turned into a charnel house. "Is this the city we dreamed of?" he asked quietly. "We came as pilgrims, not butchers." But no one answered. The men were already chanting hymns. their voices echoing off the domed ceiling. That night, as the city burned around them, they held mass upon the rock. The surviving priests sang Gloria in excelsis Deo, while smoke from the fires drifted through the broken windows. Jerusalem, the city of peace, had been reborn in fire and blood. The city stank of smoke and rot. The Crusaders, too weary to feel remorse, began to divide their spoils: gold, weapons, silks, and relics torn from temples. Yet amidst the plunder, a single question rose like a ghost over the ashes. Who will rule the city of God? Raymond of Toulouse claimed seniority. "I led men across half the world," he declared before the Council of Lords. "It was my banner that flew first upon the walls. The city should be mine to govern, for the church." Bohemond was gone, returned to Antioch. Tancred said nothing. His eyes were distant, still haunted by the slaughter. All eyes turned to Godfrey of Bouillon. He stood quietly beside the ruined walls, the smell of charred wood drifting from the Temple Mount. At last he spoke. "I will not wear a crown of gold where my Savior wore a crown of thorns." The hall fell silent. Raymond's face hardened. "Then what will you call yourself, Godfrey?" "You cannot have a kingdom without a king." "A defender," he replied. "Not a king, the advocate of the Holy Sepulchre." It was a moment of strange grace amid ruin. The lords murmured their assent, and so it was settled. Godfrey, the pious warrior who had breached Jerusalem's walls, would rule it without a crown. That night, he walked alone through the empty streets. The moonlight glimmered on pools of dried blood. From the Tower of David, he could see the Mount of Olives, the place where Christ had wept over the city. Godfrey knelt there in silence. "Jerusalem is ours," he whispered, "but we have lost something greater in taking it." A wind passed through the ruins, stirring ash like snow. In that pale light, the new ruler of Jerusalem bowed his head, neither king nor conqueror, but a man crushed beneath the weight of his own faith. Weeks passed, but the city did not heal. The Crusaders rebuilt walls, cleared streets, and buried bodies. Yet the air itself seemed cursed. Jerusalem, now under Christian rule, was silent but never still. The wind carried whispers through every alley, voices of those who had died crying out for mercy. At night, men swore they saw shapes moving on the Temple Mount, shadows gliding through the moonlight, vanishing among the columns. "The souls of the slain," muttered Tancred, crossing himself. "They cannot find rest." Godfrey, pale and gaunt, walked the streets at dawn, visiting every gate. He had forbidden looting of churches and mosques, but bloodstains still marked their thresholds. The Holy Sepulchre had been purified, draped in gold cloth, yet every candle flickered as if uncertain it belonged there. Raymond of Toulouse came to him one morning. "The pilgrims are arriving," he said. "They come to kiss the ground, to see the tomb. They call us heroes." "Heroes," Godfrey repeated, staring at the stones. "They do not see the truth. They smell incense, not blood." From the ramparts, they looked out across the desert, to the east where the Muslim world was stirring in fury. Messengers had already carried word of the massacre to Damascus, Cairo, and beyond. Armies would come. Retaliation was certain. "Then we will fight again," said Raymond grimly. Godfrey nodded, though his heart was weary. "Yes," he murmured. "But tell me, Raymond, when God looks down upon his city, does he see victory or ruin?" That night, he dreamed of Jerusalem as it once was. The Golden Dome whole again, the streets alive with traders, pilgrims, and prayers in many tongues. Then the dream turned to fire, and the voices of the dead called his name. When he awoke, the dawn was red. The holy war was far from over, it had only just begun. The year 1099 ended under a sky the color of rust. Jerusalem lay quiet, its stones scarred by fire, its wells poisoned by blood. The Crusaders called it victory, yet few could look upon the city without feeling the weight of something broken beyond repair. Godfrey of Bouillon ruled as Advocatus Sancti Sepulchri, defender of the Holy Sepulchre, from a simple chamber near the Church of the Resurrection. No crown, no throne, only a sword laid across his knees. Outside, pilgrims knelt at the gates, kissing the stones still dark from the siege. Inside, Godfrey prayed not for triumph but forgiveness. "Lord," he whispered, "we carried your cross to this city, but what did we bring instead? The love of God or the wrath of men?" Tancred entered, his armor unpolished, his face older than his years. "The Caliph gathers his armies," he said quietly. "They will come for us soon." Godfrey smiled faintly. "Then we will defend what we have taken, though I fear it was never ours to keep." That evening, they rode together along the northern walls where the breach had been repaired. The air was still, the stones cold beneath the fading sun. Godfrey stopped his horse. "Here," he said, touching the wall, "is where we entered paradise and turned it into a grave." Below, the city murmured. The sound of prayers, the creak of carts, the faint echo of rebuilding. Life was returning, stubborn and slow, like grass through ash. Yet the memory of what had been done would not fade. In his final days, when fever struck him in 1100, Godfrey's last words were said to be a whisper. "May God forgive us for how we won his city." The Crusaders had captured Jerusalem, but the cost, the souls lost, the mercy forgotten, the blood sanctified, would echo through centuries. For though they called it holy, what they left behind was a city baptized not in grace, but in fire.